The move of the Arizona Coyotes to Utah is all but final, so we're going to discuss what the nickname and look of this team should be. Welcome to Saturday's Warrior, the channel where we generally focus on BYU and Big 12 and collegiate sports, but it's not every day that a professional team relocates. So we're going to go back to our roots of what originally got us into YouTubing in the first place, talking uniforms, nicknames, and the like. And it's a perfect time to do this because yesterday we just hit 1,000 subscribers, a huge milestone for us. So thank you to all those who have subscribed or supported us through watching and liking our videos. We really, truly do appreciate it. It's helped us continue to grow this channel. And if you like talking uniforms, please subscribe if you haven't already, because we got more content coming throughout this offseason as we continue breaking down all the changes coming from across sports. So now let's get on to the main topic today. What should the Utah NHL team call itself, and what colors and general aesthetic should they go for? Ryan Smith tweeted out asking fans what they would name the team. Now, the team is relocating next season, so I'm sure they already have concepts in the works, and I'm not really sure how much influence the fans' reaction, the fan input is going to have in this process, but that's not going to stop us from trying. So we've pulled out some of the most common themes that we've seen in the responses to his post and across social media, and some others that have stood out to us to see if they can't point us in the right direction and maybe come up with something that will really truly represent this Utah team well. So let's take a look. So before we start talking about nicknames, let's discuss color scheme first. I think it would be great to coordinate with the Jazz. They've had some really good color schemes over the years. I wouldn't go with their original, even though I love it, because that's very Mardi Gras. And I wouldn't go with that 90s look. I know it's really fun and trendy to have those throwbacks now, but you don't really want to be dated and tied to a trend from a specific era. You think of all those 90s teams that came out with all the teal and the turquoise in their uniforms and color scheme, and it really dates their look. So you want to pick something a little bit more timeless. For me, I think that these two eras, and also that next one for the Jazz, which is similar to this, I would really focus or kind of go in that direction would be my preference. I wouldn't go with their latest color scheme with the black and the highlighter yellow. That's also very on trend. The other one that I would go to is the Jazz City Edition uniforms, where they used those colors representing the national parks and that landscape there. Normally, this would be too busy for me, but I think it really works. And if they wanted to incorporate that into a team, I would be down with it. The other question is, should they go by Utah or Salt Lake City or Salt Lake? And I think it really depends on the name they have. They might want to go with alliteration, but also if you have a longer multiple syllable nickname, they might want to go with something. They might want to stick with Utah, which is a little bit shorter. But I think it all depends. I'm actually flexible in that category. But in terms of the uniform, I had already mentioned with the color scheme, you want to do something really timeless. You look at some of these franchises that have been around 100 plus years that have barely changed their uniforms. So I would really go in that direction. I don't want to see them, again, going on something on trend that is going to look dated after a matter of time. And even though they're a new franchise, you can still do it. You look at the Tampa Bay Lightning, and even though they came out in the 90s and had a very modern look at that time, they've since gone back to something a bit more classic, and I think it really works for them. Looking at the latest two franchises, we got the Kraken and the Golden Knights, and both of these look pretty good. I like the general principle and idea that they're doing, but both of them have 4+ colors going on their uniform, and just to me, it just makes it a little busy, a little bit much. I would simplify things a little bit. And take, for example, this reverse retro Kraken uniform, and they've just simplified it. Even though it's the same basic design as their standard uniforms, they've kind of taken out some of the additional shades and really simplified it. And I think that helps bring it all together, and it looks a bit cleaner. So I hope that the team does that and tries not to get too cute with it. Speaking of getting too cute, please do not put mountains on the uniform. We know that Utah is in the mountains. I also know that 90s is on trend, but it does not translate well to uniforms, in my opinion. Even these BYU basketball uniforms, I really love that look overall. It was just the shorts. I was like, I get it. You're in the mountain. The other thing that I would really like to steer clear from is the double Z or use of Z at all in the name. I think it's been done a lot in Utah. Not everything has to have a double Z. I think we can get a little bit more creative and not be boxed in with that. Additionally, there are a lot of bee names out there. Bees? I'll get to that. I probably wouldn't go in that direction. It's really been used and to me kind of beaten to death. But if they do, there's some good options, which we will get into. Now, they did say already that the name Coyotes is not coming with the franchise, that the rest of the franchise history and everything will be going to Utah, but that the nickname and logo and all that will be staying in Arizona because they're hoping to get another team there at some point. Plus, with the Jazz already having Utah, I should say, already having a history of taking the nickname from another city, even though Coyotes translates a lot better than Jazz, I think it would be much better to start fresh this time for all the criticism that Utah gets for having nothing to do with Jazz. I think it's just start fresh, come up with your own name, and do something to really represent the identity of Utah. And again, Coyotes would work in that, but I think it's better to start fresh. But I wanted to show these because I think it is pretty cool to see how some people tweak the existing logos and design with the color scheme just a little bit to reflect Utah a bit more. And so I think those are some cool options, but it is not happening. And then you could also do a throwback option. You could go with Eagles. They were also the Golden Eagles, but I don't think you want to do that because you have the Golden Knights there in Vegas. And so I think they would just go with Eagles, which to me is just too generic of a name. But I do really like this throwback aesthetic and these logos. So if they were going to keep the throwback look and really lean into that, that is the only way I'd really get on board with doing the Eagles. Otherwise, I would just steer clear with it and come up with something new. And yes, I am well aware that this is a mock-up for a baseball team, but this is just an example of how that same city edition uniform could be incorporated into other sports. I like that nickname, the Arches. They could do something like that with the hockey team if they wanted to. Then there's the Utah Chads. Now, this one is obviously not a serious suggestion, I don't think, but I thought it was much funnier than a lot of the other ones out there, like the Utah Missionaries or the Utah Mormons, much more creative and inventive. Then I've seen a lot of very generic names like this, the Snowhawks. I would not do something like that. There's so much you could do, so much more creative that would be Utah specific that I would go with. Here's one. I really like the design on this. I just don't really know what Highlanders have to do with Utah specifically, but I give them credit for the logo. And then another really popular one that I've seen a lot on is the Blizzard. Now, this is not one I would do for various reasons. First of all, it's got the Z, which I'm not into, but then also because the Blizzard is very similar to the Avalanche, which would be a rival next door, and I think you want to come up with something a little more distinct. And in terms of using the Moose iconography, I wouldn't do that, whether the nickname is Moose or Blizzard or whatever, mostly because I feel like with hockey being so tied to Canada and Moose being so prevalent in Canada, I would leave that there. Plus, you already have a prominent team called the Manitoba Moose, which are not in the NHL, but nonetheless. So I wouldn't go in that direction. Then I've seen a lot of variations with elk or stags and things of that nature. And while I like this color scheme and the aesthetic that they're kind of going for me, I think we can still do something more creative than this. Then there's the Olympians. I don't love these AI-generated logos, but I like the concept. Obviously, the Olympics were in Salt Lake City, and they're hoping to, and front runners, I think, to have the Olympics there again in the near future. So that would be a good one. I see where they're going with it. Then you have the Salt Lake Loons. Now, I personally wouldn't go in this direction, but I like the creativity, and I also like that loon kind of sounds like loony, and so kind of wild and could kind of fit the persona of a hockey team, even though I'm guessing that's probably not politically correct nowadays and wouldn't fly. No pun intended. I've also seen a lot of ideas that have to do with snakes. I really like the name Utah Venom, and then the alliteration of SLC Serpents is nice, but I still feel like snakes is a bit generic and not a strong enough tie to Utah, even though, yes, there are snakes, although probably not king cobras in Utah. But another thing is when the Grizzlies left Utah, they went to Detroit and became the Detroit Vipers. So then to take on, you get an NHL team and then you name it very similarly to that team seems weird, or maybe I'm just getting too nitpicky and in the weeds on that one. Then there's the Utah Black Diamonds, obviously making reference to the great skiing in the state of Utah. And this one I've only seen in one place, but it is starting to grow on me. Now we're finally getting into nicknames that I like. The Utah Raptors would be awesome, obviously being named for the Utah Raptor, a dinosaur discovered in the state, but because there is another professional team already named the Raptors, I probably wouldn't go with this one, which sucks because the Toronto has nothing to do with dinosaurs. They just did it because Jurassic Park was popular when the team was coming out. So they took this nickname, which would have been perfect for Utah. As I already mentioned, there are so many suggestions out there that reference bees due to the fact that Utah is known as the Beehive State. I just wouldn't do it because there have already been so many teams from minor leagues that have already pulled from that. But if you do, there are some creative ones. I like this. The Stingers and the Swarm are both at least more creative ways to get a new name in there, but still pull from bees in some way and reference that. I wouldn't go in this direction, but if they do, I would go with the Hive. That has been my favorite. Again, I don't love these AI generated logos, but I really do like that name, the Hive. Now, the one that I've seen most prominently across social media and is really gaining traction with fans is the Utah Yetis, as is demonstrated by all of these different mock-ups and logos that we have here in front of us. And this one I actually really like, and I found out that the legend of Bigfoot actually began in Utah, which made me like this even more because it's snow, it has a tie to Utah. It really feels like it fits with hockey. I think this is a really good one. However, the one problem is that somebody else, the Colorado Avalanche, have already pulled from Bigfoot before with this secondary logo that they used to have. But to me, that sours this a little bit. It doesn't necessarily mean I wouldn't like it. It just kind of stinks that a neighbor, in which we assume will be more of a rival, to have already used that and that to be your core identity. So that would be one reason why I wouldn't go with this. Otherwise, this is for me a very strong contender. Now, one that I have not seen gain a lot of traction on social media, but that I think is really good is the Utah Cutthroats. And I would spell it throats, not thrats like AI did, but it turns out that the Utah state fish is the Bonneville cutthroat. And it's this fish that looks like, you look at it at the gills, it looks like there's blood coming out and that it's streaming down its belly. So not only would you have that tie to Utah's state fish, but then you would also have just a really tough sounding name. Some people might not like it because there have been incidents of people getting their throats cut by skates on the ice. So I could see that maybe being problematic. But for me, I think it is awesome. It's very akin to when you had the Atlanta Thrashers, which was the not only a tough sounding name, but it also was the state bird. So this one, it might actually be my favorite. Well, Ryan Smith, that's my 2 cents. And if you have any questions, you know how to reach me. As for the rest of you, please let us know in the comments what nickname and color scheme you like best for the new Utah NHL franchise. And please be sure to like this video and subscribe. Help us to continue to keep growing, and peace out.